Hi, everybody. We're going to talk about systems leadership in this session. I'm going to give people a chance to refresh their coffee and jump on this new link. I think we'll be small enough group that we can keep this conversational. We're going to try to keep an active chat running here. My colleague Jessica, who runs gettingsmart.com, is on with me, and she'll be trying to throw some links up there and keep track of your chat. Try to make sure that I answer good questions, that we acknowledge all the great answers and examples that are here in the audience. Hey, Ella. Nice to have you on. If you guys don't know Ella, she's the inventor of Innovator's Compass. It's a super cool 5-question design thinking process. We love it, think it's super useful. It's a really intuitive approach to design thinking. If you don't know it, just Google Innovator's Compass. There's a good chance that a Getting Smart article will pop up on it. It will help you figure your stuff out as a parent, as a teacher leader, as a system leader. So good stuff. Thanks for joining us. All right, well, people are going to keep streaming in, but I think we should dive in and get started. Let's see, Jess. Oh, we got to get, let's see, Jess, any chance you have Vince's email?
Yep, I'll work on it.
All right, see if you can find Vince. We had a last minute change in panelists. Anyway, I think I sent it to Allie, so why don't you guys send him the right one and we'll just dive in. If not, there's enough expertise in a room that we can take a stab at what we're doing. Anyway, thanks for joining us, folks. My name's Tom Vander. I'm the CEO of Getting Smart. We're a Seattle-based learning design firm. We try to help educators figure out what to do next, and it seems like a really complicated task right now. And so, like all of you here, we're scrambling, trying to figure out what the heck do we do next. We are going to talk about transformational leadership, system leadership today. How you help groups of schools, whether that's a school district or a network of schools, try to move forward. And I want to try to tackle our work by sort of looking pre-pandemic. How were we thinking about the work that we were trying to do? Like what would learning look like on a good day? We'll spend a few minutes talking about the transition that some of our leaders have made, and then we'll do that pretty quickly because I want to shift to path forward to talk about how we create a more learner-centered, thoughtful, humane, community-connected school system. We're joined today by some of America's best system heads. Susan Enfield is from Highline Public Schools. Highline's the next zip code north from me here. What many of you may not know is that Susan and I live in the zip codes between Seattle and Tacoma. They're some of the most diverse zip codes in America. It's an extraordinarily complex place that in one direction has multi-million-dollar waterfront homes, and then right next to them has Section 8 housing. The zip codes where Susan and I live and try to lead have people that speak well over 100 languages. So it's a very mobile, high levels of poverty, extremely complicated, wonderfully complicated demographics. The great thing about Buraim and Federal Way is that Susan and I can eat around the world very, very easily. We love the diversity of our communities, and I deeply appreciate the leadership that Susan's brought to Highline Public Schools. Susan, like Don, is also a member of the League of Innovative Schools, so she's also connected nationally to the work going on. Susan, why don't you just dive in and just try in short, like if you were in January or February, if you were walking into a Highline school, what were the look fors? What were you trying to create in terms of a learner experience for Highline? Maybe you could give us a picture of what a good day in elementary school looked like, and then what a high school experience looked like.
Sure. So I will start by actually going a little bit back before elementary school. We actually have an hi everybody. Well, thanks for joining, by the way. We have an intergenerational Montessori PreK here in Highline. It's, if you ever need to feel good, you just need to come and spend some time there. And we had some visitors come this several months ago, and I had the chance just to be in there and watch these little people doing their thing. No adult intervention whatsoever. They each had a purpose. They know what they were doing. They were having fun. They were interacting respectfully. And I came away from that just struck by the fact that as those children go through our system, we unwittingly, because I don't think we do it intentionally, are going to make them more teacher dependent. We're going to rob them of that independence and that curiosity that they bring with them. Because I would love to tell you that whether you walked into a 3rd grade classroom or a 10th grade classroom in Highline, you would see that level of independent learning. I don't think that we've quite gotten there. We have brilliant examples of it, but not at scale. And so prior to the pandemic, that experience in that Montessori PreK really had me thinking, what is it that we can do in our schools to really make it more student-centered and of more interest and more relevant to our kids. And Tom, I will also just say, I'll take it up one level higher and say that one of the other things that I think prevents us and our students from moving in that direction to some degree is I think that we, with the best of intentions, when we are serving students who, and by the way, I think language matters, how we talk about our kids matters. We should never label our kids. We should talk about our kids as brilliant, beautiful, and brimming with promise, and then address what we can do to help them, realize that. We talk about our kids needing grit. My kids come with plenty of grit. In fact, I would argue that our systems rob them of that because we don't say to them, you have these wonderful survival skills. You can power your way through and problem solve anything. How do we capitalize on that? And I think that those of us in really serving really high needs communities haven't tackled that at the beginning before we get to all of the fun stuff, which is the innovative problem-based learning internship world. I think we've got to step back and really think about how are we addressing our children and our students and where they're coming from, and making sure that they realize that they have a lot to bring to the table already and that we can capitalize on that. And I don't think we do enough of that. So Tom, that's sort of where my thinking was prior to this and what's sort of driving some of the, especially its secondary work that we're trying to plant the seeds for now moving forward. I hope that made some sense.
Awesome, thanks. And I forgot to do this at the outset. And before I asked Don, I just wanted to give a little space for the interesting, amazing exchange that we had at the opening. And if you wanted to add any any comments about that, if you or anybody else does. Ella, anything that that really struck you about the opening session?
Yeah, I mean, I think to the point of, you know, systems and just, I loved how they touched on the very different sort of levels, like today, very like in context right now, not
Yeah.
just COVID-19, but everything that's going on right now, about like the kinds of stuff that face individual students, like Caleb hit on students of culture, like the individual sort of moments that contribute to, you know, all the larger things that we're seeing.
No, thanks. And I appreciated Olka's comment about you can't really feel curiosity if you don't have a secure sense of identity, belonging, and safety. So I know that's been a real, Susan talked about that. That's been a real priority. So appreciate that. Anybody else want to have a quick comment about the opening, something you thought was really important?
You know, Tom, I think the whole conversation around community
Yeah.
and how we often take that for granted,
Yeah.
As thought leaders, and trying to get synergy around including the community,
Yeah.
and kind of growing that thought.
I'm gonna have Don talk about that. I do want to acknowledge that Susan, you serve like 5 cities. She's got, in addition to being it's not only demographically complicated, it's geographically complicated. So it's particularly challenging, right, to create the sense of community when it's actually communities, right?
Yeah, so we have 5 municipalities, some unincorporated part of King County, but dealing with different cities and different politics within different cities and getting people to galvanize around one system is a challenge. Yeah.
So Don, let me turn to you and just, I might have you do a couple things, both try to describe your vision for what a good day of learning looks like in St. Vrain, and then maybe just because we're on the subject of community, maybe you can talk about your approach to building community around that vision, because you've really done that better than anybody.
Sure. No, thanks. Appreciate that, Tom. And thank you, Susan, for sharing your thoughts as well. You know, St. Vrain is a school system in Colorado. We have about 33,000 students. We are the 7th largest school district in Colorado out of 178. We span out over about 411 square miles, and consistent with what Susan was saying, we have many different areas. We work with 7 mayors across our system. We have about 60 schools, and we're continuing to grow, but our build-out plan is for about 80,000. So we're at 33,000 today, and we'll just keep growing at a pretty good clip here as far as the eye can see. You know, we think about our system in a comprehensive way. From pre-K to 14, all of our elementary schools have high quality preschool in them with curriculum and highly qualified teachers. And then all of our elementary schools also have full day kindergarten. So we want to make sure that good day that you talk about starts out from a systems approach as a good pre-K through 12, pre-K through 14 experience. The 14 is our PreK program, which I'll share a little bit about that. But we really try to empower our students to learn. And in order to do that, they have to be actively engaged. We customize their learning experiences so that they can learn in a way that makes sense to them and that they're passionate about. And then they can take that learning and they can apply it to real world problems, and they can apply it in contexts that are unfamiliar to themselves, because the world is changing at such a fast pace. Back in 2008-9, when we started this movement in St. Vrain to transform our educational system, we realized that education was changing so fast with the onset of technology, from social media to artificial intelligence and these large repository systems that were out there. And so the old system we knew was becoming antiquated too fast for us to stay. So we had to change our environments quite a bit. And our learning environments have been enhanced by technology. We have a strong one-to-one initiative that allows kids to learn and interact with people all over the country. And it's diversified in terms of our systems. We have iPads, we have laptops, document cameras, sound systems, projectors throughout every classroom within our 60 schools. And we have every space is a learning space. So kids are not confined to the four walls of a classroom. It can be a hallway, it can be a library, it can be outdoors, it can be in a traditional classroom. You know, and that piece of the personalization is really important to us.
Don, just let me jump in here and just, what specifically did you do to build such strong community support for your agenda?
Well, back in 2008, when we were beginning this process, we had to rebuild trust in our community. I was just becoming the superintendent. We were coming off of financial collapse in 2002 that extended all the way through 2007, based on some financial errors that were made in the previous administrations and things along those lines. And it was so catastrophic that the state treasurer had to loan the district millions of dollars just to keep us afloat. So we had to start from square one, and we brought together a large contingency of people that represented stakeholders across our group. We called it Vision 2020. Never would I have ever imagined 13 years ago, 12 years, that I would still be the superintendent to have seen that vision come to fruition. But we started with the concept of it's no longer going to be about what you can do for us as a school system. It's going to be about what can our school system do for you. And that's why we shifted the conversation away from class sizes, we don't have enough money, we have a shortage of teachers, all of those narratives that are negative in nature. We shifted to, if you want a powerful economy, you have to have a powerful school system. If you want public safety and national security and pride in your community, it starts with a powerful school system. If you want your property values to hold and continue to increase, it starts with a great school system. And the quality of the service industry and democracy and the infrastructure, all of those things. And that resonated with our community because they began to see what public education really provides. The other thing that we were able to really drive home is that 90% of our children in the United States, K through 12, attend a public school. So this is not just about school. This is about the future of our community, our state, our country, and our world. And that messaging really brought together a coalition of people prior to who had maybe not been so supportive. And it led to the passage of our first mill levy override in the history of our district since we opened in 1961. And that gave us the financial stability to begin to move forward with our vision. We also knew that in order to walk this out, we had to create plans that started with pilots and then grew from there. So we built out our infrastructure around technology, and we made sure that our teachers had strong professional development so that we didn't send them into this transformation without being well equipped. And so their confidence level was high. We also started bringing in parents, called them parent boot camps, to help get them acclimated to the technology that their children would be working with. And we worked with our student body, and we worked with our business community. We started out with a strong relationship with IBM back in 2008. And today we have a strong relationship with about 95 corporate partners, among the largest throughout the world. And it's that kind of coalition building. The other thing that I would tell you, Tom, is it's not an event. This process of building coalitions is something that starts and it never stops. And we're always out in the community doing personal presentations, brochures that get mailed, social media. It's a constant, steady flow of interactive communication.
So I want to, the work that you've done to rally business support in your community is really second to none. So that's certainly a big important lesson. I think Michaelina Hosen in Dallas has probably done that as well as you have. And it's been super important a lot of you have been involved in efforts like Portrait of a Graduate, where you have a community conversation where you ask people, how's the world changed? Tony Wagner taught me this. How's the world changed? As a result, what do you think kids need to know and be able to do? If you have that conversation, you can create a new, broader set of outcomes and a lot of support for it, including business support. So Don's done a great job of that. Susan, great comment in the chat. She frames this as a promise to your community. Describe that, Susan.
Sure. So when I arrived in Highline in 2012, we were able to embark on a strategic planning process with our staff and our community. And out of that grew this, and again, it comes back to asset versus deficit thinking when it comes to our kids and our communities. So as a teacher, as an educator, I had always said, I need to know every student by name and need. When I taught high school, I promised my kids that by the end of the first week of school, I would know all of their first names. I didn't use seating charts. They were expected to sit somewhere else. Every year I did it, except for 2 kids whose names I transposed for the entire year. It's a glitch in how my brain is wired. But I always felt it was important to know my kids by name and to know what they needed. When I got to Highline, though, we really were talking about approaching our students from an asset perspective. And I said, well, what if it's about us knowing every student by name, strength, and need? Let's capitalize on what our kids bring and what they're good at so that we can build their confidence and resilience so that they are better equipped to take on the unknown and problem solve. And so that promise really became the heart of the strategic plan. And what I think has been good about it is I think mission and vision statements often devolve into just being platitudes, and a promise really implies action. We're saying that I promise you, student, parent, community member, that this is what we're going to do. And I think, and when I say that it's the DNA of our system, you can't go anywhere in Highline without people knowing it. And in fact, I really knew that we were onto something when people started using it against us in board meetings. Yeah. So when I make a decision that a parent or someone doesn't like, if you knew students by name, strength, and need, you wouldn't be doing this. No. But I also think, though, it really, it shapes, it really is our North Star, right? Everything that we do has to be getting us towards that. And now in this moment, it's more important than ever.
No, it's, so I love this. And just to reiterate, for those of you that weren't at the beginning, Susan leads a high poverty, super diverse, very mobile community. So the fact that they start with this promise to know every kid is so important. It's really the only place that you could start. And I really appreciate the shared commitment. All right. We're going to turn our attention to what I think is the most interesting and important turnaround story in America with Mr. Vince Sheffield. Hey, Jen, Vince. Sorry, we had the glitch. We're good to have you. Glad to have you here. Vince is the.
Hi, how are you all?
I'm good, man. It's Vince is the deputy in El Paso. El Paso, if you guys don't remember, like 8 years ago, it was the worst example of test prep in America. Test prep was the curriculum. And then it turned into cheating, and then it turned into embezzlement, and the leadership team went to jail. And the state took over the district 7 years ago, and they invited a very interesting human being, Juan Cabrera, to be the superintendent. Juan was a bilingual teacher. But he had also, he was a bilingual teacher in California and Texas, and then he went off and got a law degree, and then he became an international software exec, and then he started a big law practice where he was serving many of the big districts in Texas. So he's got this super interesting background, and they invited Juan to become superintendent in the district, working for the state appointed board. And what happened over the next 7 years is really remarkable. Vince, give us your version of that. How did you guys build support for a new agenda that was more about kids and families and communities than the test prep approach?
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been with the El Paso Independent School District in various capacities for this is my 28th year. And as was mentioned before, approximately about 7 years ago, we were a district that was mainly focused on testing students. And this morning's presentation was very enlightening because it really resonated with me, because that seemed pretty much like our district, the things not to do, if you will. So since Mr. Cabrera came in, as was mentioned, he had a background that was not intensified on education. He had been a bilingual teacher for a couple of years, but he was an attorney, and most importantly, he had a heart for students, a big heart for students, and he still has a big heart for students. So he came in and he shifted the focus from test prep and took a big risk, and we're all grateful that he did take that risk, because now we pretty much focus on, I like to call it equity and opportunity. As was highlighted this morning, in the prior session, you heard that repeatedly, where the situation we're in right now has really made us think about equity and opportunity. The things that we preach had to be put into practice. So we start focusing just on the personal learning for students. So if you will, if you're familiar, and I know you are familiar with like an IEP in special education, what we focus on is having an IEP for every single student to connect with them and build relationships so that teachers know their students, and vice versa, the students know the teachers, and in the broader community. We do have a community-based learning structure also, because as we know and understand, many of our students need community support and help. So that was another building block for us. And this has been ongoing for the last 7 years. And so we brought in programs like, if you're familiar with New Tech, that focuses on project-based learning. If you're familiar with active learning. We brought in active learning frameworks so that our teachers would become more facilitators as opposed to direct teaching of students, because the students were not actively engaged. It was a big turnaround, or it is still a big turnaround, because we are intentionally not focused on testing students. Of course, this year, there was no test in Texas, which was good for us, because it gave even in the virtual learning environment, it gave teachers the opportunity to become creative and teach in creative ways and work more actively with their students, even in this type of environment. So as was mentioned, our entire school board was brand new. We were taken over by the state. So you can imagine you had a brand new school board who was pretty much steeped in traditional learning methods. Some of them are or were teachers. And so I don't want to say they were against everything we were doing, but they questioned everything we were doing. So we just continued moving forward. And now we are a school district that other districts look to for support. We're constantly being asked to present our story. We're constantly being asked to appear on panels just to talk about the story. The story is very enlightening, if you will, but at the same time, you can imagine that what was being done in the district was really not helping kids. In fact, I would say it was hurting kids. And so we're here now, we're moving forward. We have tremendous community support. I wanted to mention, just listening to the speakers earlier, what we've learned throughout this pandemic, if you will, is that the need for community support and the need to help our communities is ever so urgent. And we were prepared for it simply because that's what we believe. You know, we believe community first. We believe in connecting with each and every student, no matter how hard the journey. We believe, and that's what's mentioned earlier, in what the students are going to need to be successful in life are things like resiliency, things like confidence. And we're excited, we're moving forward, and our superintendent he's just been amazing. And I wanted to throw out a little kudos for him. He was just named the superintendent of the year for our region. So we're fast forward, moving ahead. And again, thank you for that opportunity, and I'm open to any questions that you may have.
Yeah, let me underscore a couple of things that they did really well. They very quickly built a new portrait of a graduate. It was done by engaging communities in every middle school feeder pattern, a real commitment to feeding people and having kids perform music at every venue, and that made sure that most parents in the district came out and were part of the portrait of a graduate conversation. So rich support for a beautiful portrait of a graduate that built support to do this new project-based work they call active learning. Super smart use of new tech. They seeded new tech academies all over the city, not just in the turnaround schools, but in the more affluent parts of the city. So they created these high quality choices very quickly that illustrated the strategic plan so that every part of the community had a picture of what good looks like. And then they built a systematic approach that got new technology to every school and then teacher training to every school. And so in a phased way through 90 schools, really rolled out this new agenda. So I think it's a great example of thoughtful system leadership based on strong community support. Vince is also leading the effort to reopen schools. I want to come back and talk to you about that, but maybe we can get a quick comment from Don and Susan just on what happened when you went remote, and what did you do to try to retain the best elements of a good day in school in St. Vrain, Don?
Well, you know, we had the benefit of a system that was in place where our teachers had gone through extensive training over the years with the various platforms that we used to transition into online. Our students were very familiar with the devices that they would have at home, and we had devices for every single student in their homes. We also set up hotspots across our district and provided some of the basic elements of need, resource centers and things along those lines. But we actually stayed with a structured curriculum. Our teachers were given, and they had a structured curriculum in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, third grade, and we maintained the learning that we had been engaged in up until that fourth quarter. We also made sure that we were interacting with kids on a daily basis and then keeping track of their level of participation, not only that they were engaging, but the quality of work that they were submitting, and keeping all of that, you know, moving forward in a way to bring as much normalcy as we could to the situation. I think the key is we understood that moving to online was not going to lower our expectation for students. A lot of the communication that was out there was that schools should pull back, schools should understand the stressors that families were experiencing. And we did, and we understood that, and we honored and respected that. But we also knew that the best way that we could honor our students and our families was to keep them engaged in a rigorous academic experience each and every day so that they would not necessarily lose ground and then that have a backslide even further over the summer. So all of the infrastructure was in place, the curriculum was in place, the teachers were in place, the parents engaged. We ended up throughout the entire time with our 33,000 students, we ended up with a 99.3% engagement level throughout the entire time. And then we have since transitioned into our summer programming. We also had tech instructors in every single one of our schools. So teachers had access to learning leaders and technology instructors so that they were not disconnected, so to speak, from our system, and our teachers and our students and our parents could access all of those resources as we moved forward. But I think the key is when you talked about how could we retain the best parts of our education system, we really needed to focus on doing that and not just an exercise in participate if you can. We understand you may not engage. We wanted to hold them to high expectations, but also be caring and compassionate at the same time. And again, that 99.3% engagement level is something we were proud of.
It's crazy high. John was wondering if you kept the same assessment practices in place, or were you really just trying to keep connected to kids and keep them engaged?
No, we were actually assessing the quality of their engagement. So one level of the assessment was, are you engaging? And then the second level of assessment was, are you engaging at a high level? And we actually gave kids the opportunity to improve on their grades that they had left from that end of the third quarter. We also, when we moved into the advanced placement testing, this is obviously at the high school level, we ended up administering 4,700 advanced placement tests online. The year before, when we were in the normal scenario, we administered 4,000. So we saw an increase of 700 advanced placement exams. And all of those kinds of things that were important to us before the crisis remained important to us during the crisis and afterwards. So it's been, yeah, we've maintained a lot of the same assessments. Yeah, obviously, there's flexibility, and that comes with any day. We're flexible with our students, and we're patient with scenarios that arise. But overall, we maintain the same philosophy of high expectations.
So, Susan, let's pivot and just talk about the crazy task that lies ahead of you for the next 90 days. And we're still trying to wrap up school here, but as you think about opening school, how do we, on one hand, meet the crazy demands of doing it in a healthy way and probably being ready to operate both at school and remotely, and do it in a way that continues your journey towards being more learner-centered? How are you thinking about that challenge?
Well, so like everybody else, we're learning from people around the country and around the world who are doing some of this and invested in the research and all of that. But I'm going to be very, very honest. You know, we're all at a pretty high level of overwhelm right now. Just caring for the well-being of my students, staff, and families right now is a full-time job in and of itself. Seizing this as an opportunity to identify what we refuse to come back to, like what are those inequities that now have been, that were always there and we knew they were there, but now we can say, we're not going to go back to that. How do I help our folks sort of galvanized around this visioning of what we want and what we don't want to come back to? When it comes to 6 feet apart, every other seat on the bus, masks, no masks, that's going to be dictated to us by some degree. I'm not sure that that's the best use of my team's time, is sitting down and figuring out all those things. We're reading it. We're figuring that out. I'm more interested, Tom, in figuring out, yes, we'll open safely, hands down, period, and stop. No question about that. But what we're really trying to do is, knowing that we can't do wholesale change right in the fall, what are some of the lessons learned so far? How can we start planting seeds for the long game, for real change that happens over time? And this is I'll give one small example, but I think it's a huge example. You know, that notion of every kid by name, strength, and need, we weren't delivering on that for every kid. And we talked a lot about how every student, K through 12, pre-K through 12, needs to have one meaningful adult relationship in their school. But it was happening in places, and we never operationalized it at scale. Well, guess what? it's time. And so how do we challenge ourselves as the adults in the system, myself included? So I'm not saying teachers, you have to know every single kid and check in with them every week. I'm saying all of us as the adults in the system, how do we seize this opportunity to say, we are going to operationalize collectively wrapping our arms around our kids and making sure that no kid goes missing? Because I can tell you what's been fascinating as we've measured engagement / attendance, the numbers by level and school pretty much mirrored our absentee rates. So the reality is, if they weren't engaged before, they probably weren't going to stay engaged now. And I think that that just really puts front and center in our faces as the adults, what are we going to do to make sure that our kids have a reason to come back? And I will actually quote my friend and colleague, Lavelle Brown in Ithaca, New York, who has said, he's talked to kids of color who said, I don't want to come back. That school was not a good place for me to begin with. Why do you want me to come back now? And so I think we have to have those honest conversations with our kids, our families, and our teachers around what has to change. So that's where I'm trying to focus my energy and not getting caught up in the logistical stuff, because the logistical stuff can suck everything out of you. And at the end of the day, I think those decisions will be made at a higher level. And by the way, it's not for Highline to decide. It's got to be a regional response, because if one district says, yeah, we're going to come back, and if the state recommends masks, one district says masks, district next door says no, you know, Burien and Federal Way got to be doing the same thing, Tom. And so I think as leaders, as district leaders, we've got to be careful about how we're balancing our time and energy, because here's the other thing. People are tapped out. People are tired, they're frustrated, you know, they're at their wits' end. The desperation that I can feel through email from families and staff is palpable. So how I ask people to invest their time has to be incredibly strategic.
Yep. So we added a couple of resources to chat. We've had a pretty active series called Getting Through. One of the resources that we posted was the facilities plan for Brooklyn Lab. Brooklyn hosted a design thinking charrette with a number of design firms, and they just posted yesterday a 100-page facilities plan that sort of games out a mixture of time and place shifting in order to create physical distancing. It's a quick picture of the complexity that many of you are likely to face in the fall. And as Susan said, it is going to be some of this is going to be dictated by state, but some of it's also going to be school specific based on the facility and how kids get to school and the number of buses that deliver. So,
but Tom, I also think I will just say too that I think there's going to come a point where some of the recommendations around safety will make reopening or any kind of a hybrid model. Because I was really thinking, how can we, the more we look at this hybrid model, the more we're not sure that it's feasible. If I can only transport 10 kids on a bus at a time, yep, it ain't happening. So I think we've really got to look at
I think what some people don't understand, if you lead a suburban district and kids get to school on a bus, then that is the limiting factor to your distancing strategy. Vince, I know you lead the reopening task force in El Paso. What's the two-minute overview of the work that you're trying to do there?
Yes, we're trying to connect the work because we do have a task force, and then we have subcommittees connected to the task force. And the subcommittees are working on such things as the academics, the physical spacing, as Susan mentioned earlier, I just met with the regional superintendents yesterday and expressed to them how important it is to take a regional concept to reopen schools, understanding that some things may be dictated from the state, but maybe not. And so we just had that conversation yesterday. And so what we're doing is we're trying to keep the academics and just the CDC and the state guidelines and the city guidelines, because we also have to interact with the city with regard to reopening our schools. And then within about 2 or 3 weeks from now, we're going to come together and try to tie everything together. Some of our struggles are thinking about things like PPE, thinking of things like feeding our students, all of those, whatever you can imagine creeps in to our planning sessions. But we're presently meeting about twice a week, and then meeting with the smaller subcommittees once a week. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. And we are we're researching everything, looking at different models. Yesterday, one of the superintendents from one of our smaller districts had gone out and did a spacing challenge on the bus, because it's a rural district, and figured that in order to get all the students to school by 8 o'clock in the morning, she would actually have to start transporting them at 4 o'clock in the morning. So those types of things, we just have to take into account. So we're working hard, we're working daily, but I cannot tell you it's not a daunting task. It's going to be a challenge, and we're not going to make people happy, and we have to understand that going in. It's a lot of work. It's tough work, but it's worth it for our students. We want to get them back and keep connecting with them in ways that are meaningful for them. So that's where we are.
I appreciate the way you and Don and Susan and your teams are keeping kids in their best interest at the center while you do this. Susan, it just feels appropriate to end on the promise. How do you remind us one more time of how you describe that?
So it's every student by name, strength, and need, so they graduate prepared for the future they choose. At its highest level, it's our commitment and definition of equity.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful way to think about this. And, as complicated as the road is that we're going to walk together, if we can just keep that in mind, there's nothing more important than that. If we can help kids understand that they're known, that they are physically, emotionally safe at school, that there are people that care about them and their future, we will have done a good thing.
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to share something that, resonated with me with what Susan's talking about with the promise. In all of this, I think it's really important that we do involve students in our thinking, because a lot of the conversations that I hear are, how tired people are, how challenging it is to meet the criteria, how are we going to get this? And you don't hear as much about those students and the fact that they're going through this system one time and they don't really have a chance to be patient while we get our second wind. And I think that that's at the heart of equity and really caring deeply about students, that the conversations focus on how they're feeling versus how we're feeling. The other thing that I think is really important is that we look at things differently. We look at things, is our day going to end at 3 or can we go into the evening? Can we add Saturday to the mix? Can we start earlier in the morning? Are there things that we can do? And we have to break out of our paradigm. And I think that's one of the greatest strengths of the teachers and the staff and the community in St. Vrain, that we broke out of that paradigm years ago.
Yep.
And so we're not confined to a structure that's limiting. And I think this is an opportunity for others to begin to see our work in a different way. But it always has to be about how the kids are feeling and not how we as adults are feeling.
Yep. With a lot of respect and appreciation for you, Susan, Vince, Nick, John, all the other school district leaders on here, we really appreciate you, your work, your commitment. Thanks for being here. Hope you can join us for a couple minutes on the other side. We're going to close things out. Thanks. Be well. Take care.
Thank you.